Well, when you're a colorblind guy with very little style, when it comes to dressing, you actually need a little bit of help. And so for the past 31 years, Charlene's been sort of helping me not to clash when I go out because I do have a little problem with colors. And so she's usually the one who kind of says, this works with this and this works with that. And last weekend, we were in Seattle with our son Noah, and we were planning to go to church. And so I packed during the day. She was gone. I was packing up, and I got home. So I packed my outfit that I was going to wear on Sunday morning to church. I thought, we're going to go to church. I probably should have something kind of nice. And so I packed it up, and as I was packing it, I thought, this is going to be great. I think this will look kind of hip, and this will be awesome, and I'll wear this. So I put it in my bag, and Sunday morning came along, and there we are in the hotel, and I'm all ready to go and kind of dressed, and we're packing up, and everything's ready to go because we got to put it all in the car and then go to church. And Charlene comes out where I was, and she looks at me, she goes, that's not going to work. And I'm like, what do you mean that's not going to work? Because that shirt doesn't go with that sweater. I know you think that sweater is this color, but it's not that color, and that shirt's it's not going to work. And so I looked at her and I said, well, I'm going with it. It's all I got, right? So sorry, you'll just have to be the lady who's, people will be going like, doesn't that guy's wife give him any help, right? I think that's what she assumes goes on, right? When people see like I'm clashing. And then she says as we're walking out the door, she goes, yeah, a couple of weeks ago you came to church, I showed up and I thought, he dressed without me today. They're like, I doubt if any of you ever think that, like you show up and go, if that guy was a snappier dresser, we'd come back. But it is one of those things, right, where if you can't see the right thing, sometimes it's helpful to have somebody tell you what to put on and how to dress, and like that doesn't go with that, or that color's a color, it's not what you think it is. And that's been a challenge for me in my life. And I suppose it's a first world problem, but sometimes we do need people to help us to kind of sort out what we're supposed to wear and how it's supposed to look. But we as we look at this idea of emotionally healthy spirituality, this week particularly, knowing yourself that you may know God, one of the things we realize is that there are a lot of people, there are a lot of voices in our culture that want to tell us what we should look like, how we should dress, how we should act, what it means to have certain things, like when are you with it, when are you with the group, and there's a lot of pressure. And I think our kids feel a lot of pressure, but even as adults, we feel a lot of pressure about what we're supposed to be, or how we're supposed to look, or what we should be doing. And in the midst of all that, it's possible to not really mature as people of God because we spend a lot of time trying to impress other people with what we do, what we have, or what they think of us. So we want to think about that today. And as we look at this, we're going to turn to 1 Samuel chapter 17, where we have the story of David and Goliath. But the big idea today is really this. If you know and trust yourself, and if you know and trust God, then you can kind of live above the fray. You can kind of live above the battle and be successful. Now, the text we're going to read this morning starts in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 17. It's a long section, so I want to invite you to turn there in your Bible. It was too long to put up on the screen. So take a look. If you have a Bible, there's probably one in the seat there in front of you. But I'm going to read through this text. 1 Samuel chapter 17, beginning in verse 17. And Jesse said to his son David, take for your brothers an ephah of this parched grain, these 10 loaves, and carry them quickly to the camp of your brothers. Also take these 10 cheeses to the commander of their 1,000. See if your brothers are well, and bring some token to them. Now remember what's going on here. Story of David and Goliath. The Israelites are on one side of the valley of Elah, and the Philistines are on the other side, and they've been there for 40 days. Kind of yelling back and forth. Neither army wants to go into the valley and expose themselves. So they send a man down for single combat. They send Goliath down, and they go for 40 days with him sort of taunting them. Verse 19, now Saul and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose early in the morning and left with the sheep with the keeper, and took the provisions and went, as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the encampment as the host was going out to the battle line, shouting the war cry, and Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army, and David left the things in charge of the keeper of the baggage and ran to the ranks and went and greeted his brothers. As he talked with them, behold, the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, came up out of the ranks of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before. And David heard him. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were much afraid. And the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And the king will enrich the man who kills him and with great riches, and will give him his daughter and make his father's house free in Israel. And David said to the men who stood by him, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him in the same way, so shall it be done for the man who kills him. Now Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, why have you come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. And David said, what have I done now? Was it not but a word? And he turned away from him all and toward another, and he spoke in the same way, and the people answered him again as before. And when the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and he went for him. He sent for him. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, you're not able to go out against this Philistine to fight with him, for you're but a kid, and he's been a man of war since he was a kid. But David said this to Saul, your servant used to keep sheep for his father, and when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. And if he rose up against me, I caught him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God. And David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. Then Saul clothed David with his armor, and he put a helmet of bronze on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. And David strapped his sword over his armor, and he tried to go in vain to go, for he had not tested them. Then David said to Saul, I can't go with these, for I have not tested them. So David put them off. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in his shepherd's pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. And you know how the story goes. Goliath came down and he yells at David, am I a dog that you would attack me with sticks? Come near to me and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air. And David says, it's not going to work that way. But I'm going to give your birds and all of the army, I'm going to give your flesh and all of the army's flesh to the birds of the air. Now, we read that story. It's a familiar story to us. But I want you to think about the voices that David's hearing as he comes, right? David shows up. His dad has said to him, hey, bring some stuff to your brothers and to the commanders of their groups that they are a part of in their battle groups, and just bring the stuff and bring back news. Let me know how your brothers are doing. And so David shows up, and they've got this thing going on where this Goliath is just like taunting the armies of God, and David doesn't get it. And he says, what's going to be done for this person who slays Goliath? Well, he's going to be enriched, and he's going to get Saul's daughter, and he's going to be free in Israel, and this is a big thing. And David says, why is no one going? His brother Eliab says, why are you here? I think it's older brother, right? It's the older brother. Why are you here? And who have you left those few sheep with? Notice this. It's not who's doing your work at home. It's who have you left the few sheep with? You're insignificant, David. It's just a few sheep. I mean, why are you here? You think you're special, but you're not. You just watch over a few sheep like anyone could do that. Why are you here? Why did you leave the sheep and come here? There's this attempt by his brother to belittle him. And there's likely been some tension between David and his brothers, don't you think? I mean, this has probably been the case. And David kind of comes, and you can get the impression that David's he comes with a little bit of attitude, like, guys, come on, who's going to go do this? Well, I'll go. If nobody else is going to go, I'll go. So his brother's struggling. So he hears this voice. You're kind of insignificant, David. What makes you think you can do this? When he says that he'll go, they brought him to Saul, and he says to Saul, I'll go fight against Goliath. And Saul says, you can't go. You're just a kid. And he's been a warrior since he was a kid, right? So we have this moment where David says, I'm going to go do this thing for God, and David's brothers and Saul, and probably everyone who heard him was like, oh man, this guy's going to get fed his lunch, right? This is not going to work. And there are times in our lives when we listen to the wrong voices, right? There are times in our lives when we listen to the wrong voices. And so becoming emotionally healthy and growing up in maturity means that we have to listen to the right voice. We have to listen to the right voice. The first thing that happens when David says he's going to go fight Goliath is that Saul tries to clothe David with his armor. Right? It says that he put his helmet on David, and he put the chain mail on David, and David strapped on the sword, and you notice that he sort of starts to clunk around in this stuff, and we know this, that Saul was big. We also know that David wasn't a small guy, but he's young at this point, right? And I kind of picture this like, you know when your kids are little and they dress in your clothes, and it's like you see them, and it's like it's kind of cute, but if they start to run, they're going to probably trip over them because the pant legs are too long, the shoes are too big, the clothes don't fit. And that's really what David says. I mean, think about David. It's no small amount of courage that takes David saying to Saul, this is not going to work for me. Like, at first he kind of thinks he might do it, right? It's a little bit of a heady thing. I'm going to go fight Goliath. I'm going to be wearing Saul's armor. I'm going to be carrying Saul's sword. That's a big deal. He kind of comes to his senses and realizes that that's not going to work for him. I kind of wonder, this is totally speculation on my part, but I sometimes like to do that in stories. What was Saul up to? I wonder if Saul's not still trying to get just a little bit of credit. Like the guy's probably going to get killed out there. Nobody else wants to go. He's probably not going to make it. But if he does make it, I could say, well, he was wearing my armor. Right? What's going on in Saul here besides fear? But David just kind of comes to his senses. And he says, this isn't going to work. I'm not going to be able to go in this because I've not tested them. I don't know how they work. This Saul, this seems to work for you. This seems to work for all the military guys around us. But this is not going to work for me. And he understands at this moment that he can't go with Saul's armor. He has to go with his own. He can't go with Saul's weapons. He has to go with his own. And it takes a little bit of courage to recognize sometimes that we need to listen to a different voice. I'm not going to listen to the voice of saying, you should do this, do that, and take these weapons. David kind of stands up and says, that's not going to work for me. Now, there is one area of my life, one area that I reserve the right to wear clashing clothes. And Charlotte and I know she gives me a hard time about this sometimes, but when I'm going to the gym, sometimes I dress for the gym, right? And I'm headed out the door. And many, many times over the last 31 years, Charlotte will say, you can't wear that to the gym. And I'm like, why not? Well, that doesn't go. And this is the one place in my life where if she's giving me advice about clothing, I say, I'm wearing it. I'm wearing this. It's part of a you're not the boss of me sort of thing, but there's a mental thing that I literally go through when I go to the gym. It's this. I don't go to the gym to impress other people about what I'm wearing or what I'm doing. Right? I choose the gym I go to because no one's usually there. I go to the gym to not be with people. So frankly, if I look funky and I clash and people think I don't want to hang around that guy, he clashes, it's all the better for me. Right? But mostly I want it to be a mental thing where I say, I'm really going to the gym for this. I don't need to look good. I don't need to wear the right clothes. I'm going for this. That's the one place in my life that I like to say to Sean, no, sorry, I'm wearing this. And I hope it really bugs you while I'm walking out to my truck as you watch me, But I just do that. That's like the one area where I say, I know I clash, and I know I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to. And when David goes out to fight, he needs to listen to the right voice, which for him at this moment is his voice. It's the voice of God saying, David, don't forget who you are. And he needed to have the right clothes. The clothes for David to go fight Goliath were not Saul's armor and helmet and sword. They didn't work for him. And so it says that David took those things off and he picked up his shepherd's pouch and he picked up his staff and he picked up his sling and he grabbed 5 smooth stones and he puts those in the pouch and he goes. He says, I can't go in your clothes, Saul. I got to go in my own. I haven't tested these. And you know how that story goes. Goliath jeers at him. And people are thinking, how is he going to do that? Like, what's going on here? What's going to happen? How's this all going to work out? This can't end well. And the challenge for us is sometimes we listen to the voices around us about who they think we're supposed to be. We're tempted in a lot of ways to sort of fit in with the conventional wisdom around us. And if we live that way, we may not ever really truly know who we are. We may not truly know who we are. There are 3 temptations that throw us off when we think about really understanding and knowing ourselves. And we see these 3 temptations with Jesus in the wilderness in Luke chapter 4, verses 1-13. There are three temptations that can come our way that can throw us off. The first thing is temptation number one is this, that I am what I do. Think about that. Here's a temptation for us in this culture. I am what I do. Now, in Luke chapter 4, and Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness for 40 days, being tempted by the devil. He ate nothing during those days, and when they were ended, he was hungry. And the devil said to him, if you are the Son of God, right? If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become bread. And Jesus answered him, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone. How tempted are we in our culture to think that we are what we do? And Satan says to Jesus, if you're really the Son of God, let's see what you can do. Let me see what you can do. Let's try to impress me with what you can do. And our culture tells us that there are certain things that if you can do those things, you should be valued. And if there are other things you do, you're not so valued. And so the question is, how much of our sense of identity do we get, and how much of it is wrapped up in what we do? Think about this. If someone were to say to you, hey, I've heard that, do you know this guy? I heard about this guy, John Roberts. He lives in Most Lake. He's been around for a while. Do you know that guy? And if you said, yeah, I know him, I would say, well, tell me about that guy. Well, here's what he does, right? Won't you start there? That's very frequently where we start. Who is a person?
Well, that's what we do. Or if
someone asks you, about yourself, well, one of the very first questions is, what do you do? And we can value each other in this culture on the basis of what we do. How much of your identity is wrapped up in what you do? Our temptation is to believe that we are what we do. Now, here's the challenge with that. If what we do changes, we may be in jeopardy of losing our identity, right? You are not what you do. What you do is important, and what you do, maybe what you do because God shaped you to do that, but you're not what you do, and our temptation is to believe that we are what we do. The second temptation that we struggle with is a temptation that I am what I have. I am what I have. It says the devil took him up and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time and said to him, to you I will give all this authority and their glory, for it has been delivered to me, and I will give it to whom I will. If you then will worship me, it will all be yours. And Jesus answered him, it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. This is a challenging, this is a powerful temptation that we are what we have. And so Satan takes Jesus up to this mountain and shows him all of that he can survey, all of that he can see out in front of him. And Satan says, if you worship me, you can have all of this. Imagine how important you'll be if you have all of this. And we understand that we live in a culture that values the things we have. Even in our city, and when people are getting to know you, sometimes the question they want to ask is, well, where do you live? You ever want to just go why does it matter? I live in a house. Where do you live? I live in a house. Oh, what do you drive? A car. But there's status things, right? Like where you live sort of matters, and you live in the nicer neighborhood or not so nice neighborhood, that kind of starts to reflect on you. And so we ask these questions. I don't think we always mean to ask them that way, but just think about how unconsciously we ask those questions. And what does it mean for us? The temptation is that we are what we have. And so Satan says to Jesus, you can have it all if you worship me. How much of our identity is wrapped up in what we have? Are you okay with Kirkland jeans, or you need the designer ones? Right? Are you okay with the okay car, or you need the one that's got the symbol on it that everybody goes, the point is that we aren't what we have. That's not who we are. This challenges our identity a lot because we just have those things as status symbols. You may know of those things that kind of hit you a little bit, right? The third temptation is I am what others think. This is a challenging one as well for us, isn't it? It says, and he took him to Jerusalem and set him on the pinnacle of the temple and said to him, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to guard you, and on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. And Jesus answered him, it is said, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test. And when the devil had ended every temptation, he departed from him until an opportune time. Satan says, look, hey, how awesome would it be if you were standing on the pinnacle of the temple, you threw yourself off, and just before you hit the ground, the angels caught you. People would go, that really is the Son of God. They would think, that guy's really amazing. That's impressive. Who is this? And we live sometimes in that place too, don't we? That if we live by what others think of us. And that's very powerful. Like, what is someone's opinion of me? And we can become people pleasers, and we can forget that there are times when we have to look at somebody and say, I'm just not going to do that, or I'm just not going to be that, because we really want to be accepted. It's powerful, particularly with young people, but also with us, right? As older people. These three temptations that I am what I do, or I am what I have, or that I am what others think, can really press us. And I understand it. We've probably all been there. Do a thought experiment over the next couple of days, maybe. If you're wondering which of these temptations is most powerful for you, ask yourself the question, if I suddenly couldn't do what I do now, how would I identify myself? Or if suddenly all the things that I have that I really like, and some of those things which give me status, whether you bought them for that reason or not, but if those things were taken away, where would my sense of identity be? Or if suddenly the people who affirm me and say I'm awesome started telling me that I wasn't that awesome, where would I be? You know, we talk about identity crisis, right? So go, well, I'm kind of in an identity crisis. Listen, here's why identity crises happen. If your identity is in what you do, that can be taken away from you. I think about this quite a bit, actually. So if suddenly I couldn't be a pastor anymore and I did something else, fill in the blank, whatever it is, I'm probably not going to be a space shuttle pilot, so I can't. Well, that would be even more awesome than being a pastor. But if I suddenly couldn't be a pastor, what would my identity be? Because if it's wrapped up in this role and this thing I do, then it's going to go away. Or if suddenly the stuff that I have was taken away and I lose my identity, then where am I at? Identity crisis, because what we do can be taken away, what we have can be taken away, and what others think can be taken away. When our identity is not rooted in something that's transcendent, then we're always up for grabs. Like our identity is it's got to be deeper than what we do, what we have, or what others think. And for David in this moment with Goliath, it's interesting because he doesn't really care what other people think. He knows that it doesn't matter what he does. He's a shepherd, he's not a soldier, and Saul tells him that. Like, you can't go, you're a shepherd. His brother tells him that. Where are those few sheep you have? Who don't you leave the sheep with? You're insignificant. Doesn't matter to David what he does. Saul says, you can't go out against him, you're just a kid. And Goliath's been a warrior since he was a kid. David says, look, I'm going. It doesn't matter to him what he has or what he doesn't have. Hey, David, put my armor on. This will protect you. It doesn't matter what armor I'm wearing. I can't go in those things. I'm not tested. I haven't tested them. It doesn't matter what others think. I don't care that you think I'm just a kid or that I'm insignificant because I just have a few sheep. I'm not going to live out my life based on those things. What did matter to David in these moments was that he knew himself and he knew God. And part of that is that he had learned from past experiences. Right? He had learned from past experiences. Notice what David says to Saul in answer to the challenge that he's just a kid. Saul says, you can't go out against Goliath, you're just a kid. And David says this, well, here's what I do know. Here's what I know. I've been keeping my sheep, and once in a while, a lion or a bear comes and steals one of the lambs away, and when that happens, I go after them, and I get them back. And if the bear or the lion rises up against me, I grab it by its mane and kill it. That's what I know. That's what I know. I mean, who am I to go up against a lion or a bear? Everybody would think that was a crazy thing to do with just a stick and a sling. But that's what I know. See, David learned from past experiences. David's confidence was rooted in what he'd already seen God do. Like, God protected me. God was with me in these battles. And throughout David's life, he watches God at work, and then he relies on what he's seen God do. And so rather than go into the battle with the conventional wisdom and fight Goliath on his terms, David flashes back to the moments in his life when he knew that God had delivered him. He trusted that God had been involved and that he could trust him to be involved again. This is the importance of this moment in the story. So David's confidence was rooted in what he'd already seen God do. The second thing that David relied on was what he already knew. Right? He already knew some things about how he would fight. David puts on Saul's armor and he says, I can't go with this. I haven't tested these. I'm going to go with what I already know. I'm going to go with the sling and with a few stones. There's a thinker by the name of Malcolm Gladwell who's written a book titled David and Goliath. He's written some other books, The Tipping Point. I just want to confess to you, I've not read David and Goliath, but I've seen some interviews from this because I'm interested in Malcolm Gladwell. And in this book, this is what he says, essentially. David actually had the upper hand. Like, we think of David and Goliath as a story where David was this underdog, but the reality is because of the way David went to fight, Goliath didn't stand a chance. First of all, the sling, we think of a kid's sling as a toy, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a sling that, according to ancient history from texts that we were able to find, is accurate up to 440 feet. I said 440 yards in my first sermon, and so 4 or 5 people corrected me. It's like, really, 440 yards? That's a long ways. I don't trust a sling that far. Really? I can't help it if you don't trust God. "440 feet, 440 yards. What's it matter?" It's like, that's impressive. It was the case that there were some who were accurate enough with the sling they could actually hit a bird in flight. That's impressive. This was a formidable weapon, right? The sling allowed David to stay out of striking distance, right? It's like if he'd have gotten within, 100 feet of Goliath, the thing would have probably been over. He'd have thrown the spear or whatever. But the fact that he's using what he knows how, and it's unconventional, actually gives him the upper hand. Come here so that I can give you your flesh to the birds of the air. And David's like, I think I'm going to stick back here and throw rocks at you. Let's see how that goes, right? It's a great story, but the point is that David catches Goliath off guard. Goliath's expecting somebody to come out and start swinging a sword at him. He knows he can win that battle. David doesn't go that way. It's unconventional. It's unconventional the way David goes, but he knows himself, and he says, look, I know what I've seen God do, and I know what I can do with the tools God's given me. I'm going that way. I know it's unconventional, and others might think I'm crazy, but I trust that God is going to use me in the ways that he has, and I'm trusting God's going to show up in the ways that he has. And so, again, Gladwell kind of comes to the conclusion that Goliath doesn't stand a chance against this kid. It's a good story. That's a definitely out-of-the-box way of looking at the story of David and Goliath. Most of us don't look at it that way. But the point is that David knew what he had seen God do, and he knew what he could do with the weapons that he was used to. Whatever the conventional wisdom was, and so he was able to go into the battle with a much different view than Saul, or than his brothers, or the rest of the army. Peter Scazzaro uses a term that I had not heard before in his book, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, and the term is differentiation. And this is what differentiation is. Differentiation refers to a person's capacity to define his or her own life's goals and values apart from the pressures of those around them. So just think about that. Are you able to determine your own life's goals and values apart from the pressures of those around you? When someone says to you, hey, we should really do this, do you have the capacity to say, that's actually not what I'm doing? I'm actually not going that direction. I'm not going to choose that path. And those aren't my values, and those aren't my goals. And so if I follow you in this project, I'll actually be going places I don't want to go and doing things I don't want to do. Differentiation involves the ability to hold on to who you are and who you are not. The degree to which you are able to affirm your distinct values and goals apart from the pressures around you while remaining close to people important to you helps determine your level of differentiation. That's a really important idea. Like, it's important for all of us, but if you're a young person in here, you're facing this really more probably than a lot of us do when we're older, right? Because you're doing it every day at school. You're facing these questions of who you are and what do you value and how you dress, and there's this, it can be a horrible place sometimes, but even for grown-ups, even for adults, there's this challenge of, you are what you do, you are what you have, or you are what others think. Differentiation is the degree to which you're able to stay true to yourself no matter what you do, no matter what you have, and no matter what others think. It's not easy. I'm not being flippant about this. It's a challenge. And you've got to surround yourself. We all have to surround ourselves with people who will affirm who we are without what we do, without what we have, and without a matter of placing on us what they think we should be. It's a challenge to have that kind of relationship in our lives. But because David knew himself, and because David knew God, he trusted himself and he trusted God, he was really able to live above the fray, right? He was able to kind of rise above what other people could see was going on. David could be seen in this story as a little bit arrogant or maybe even a little bit insolent. But David really is just, he's saying, like, this is how I'm going to go. I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to go and fight this battle, and I'm willing to do it even though it looks like I can't possibly win. How were Saul and the warriors, including David's brothers, thinking about this battle? They were thinking about it this way. Goliath is like 9 feet tall. He really was a giant. That's a thing. He's been in combat. I mean, who can beat him? You get up against this guy one-on-one, man-to-man. There's no way. He's just too big. It's never going to work. My sword is, I'm pretty good with it, but I'm not going to be able to stand against that. It's never going to work. That's how they were looking at it. Saul was like, I don't think I can defeat him, and none of the other military guys there, the warriors, they didn't think they could beat him. Partly because their eyes are on the conventional wisdom. Goliath's much more experienced. He's much bigger. It's not that hard to figure out, right? This is just how it's going to go. Their eyes were more on Goliath. David's eyes are on what he had seen God do. David's eyes weren't actually on the battle. This taunting and waiting had been going on for more than a month. Imagine remember what it was like when you were a kid and you got on the high dive at the pool for the first time? And you get out to the end. There's only one way of doing this successfully. Get to the end, jump. Right? The longer you stand there, the more likely it'll be it's going to be hard to jump. You got to get to the end of the board, you got to jump. These guys have been hanging around for 40 days, and this taunting has been going on. Their eyes were glued to Goliath. A fray is usually a disorderly or protracted battle, a struggle or dispute. It just goes on and on and on. And then you lose perspective, and they'd lost perspective. And all they could see was what was in front of them, Goliath. But David walked with a clear vision of God. First of all, he understood who he was in God, and he understood who God was. He went by what he had seen God do already, and he went by what he already knew, as unconventional it was, and this is how we know ourselves. And then it's how we know God. And it's important that we know ourselves and we know God if we're going to stay above the battle, if we're not going to get sucked into it and be defeated by what's going on all around us. And so it comes back to this. If you know and trust yourself and you know and trust God, you can live above the fray. And so here's the question. Who are you? Do you know who you are? Let me invite you to think about this again this week. Who are you, apart from what you do, and apart from what you have, and apart from what others think? Now, if you do that thought experiment and you say to yourself, I don't know who I am apart from what I do, and I don't know who I am apart from what I have, and I don't know who I am apart from what others think, it would be really helpful for you to start sorting that out. And it's going to mean asking some questions. But before I talk about the questions we can ask ourselves or that we can ask each other, let me just say to us, what would it be like if we could actually see each other as we really are? I came across this word in the last couple of weeks, sabona. And it's an African word. It's an African greeting, most common among the Zulu tribe, and it means this: I see you, you are important, and I value you. I love this word, right? Sabona. I see you, I value you, and you are important to me. Notice this: I see you, I value you, you are important to me. It's about you. Since my granddaughter's been born, I have this little thing this is the game that I play with her. It's actually not a game that I play with her. It's something I do with her. But you heard the Mr. Rogers song? It's you I like. It's you I like. It's not the things you wear. It's not the way you do your hair, but it's you I like. The way you are right now, the way down deep inside you. Not the things that hide you, not your fancy whatever she's wearing, not your fancy clothes, not your fancy chair, not your fancy book. Those things are just beside you, but it's you I like. I love this song, and I've committed myself to sing it to her every time I'm with her, and so I do. And I know there's going to be a day when she's going to be like, got to do this again? But I sing her that song because there's a truth there, isn't there? It's you I like. It's you yourself. Every part of you, your skin, your eyes, your feelings, whether old or new. I hope you'll remember, I sometimes sing even when you're 92, that it's you I like. It's you yourself. Sabona. I see you. You are important, and I value you. It's a way to make the other person visible and to accept them as they are with their virtues and nuances and flaws. How many people in your life love you for who you are, no matter what? Timothy Keller in his book, The Meaning of Marriage, I tell you this a lot of times, but I just love it so much I have to tell it to you again. To be loved but not known is superficial, right? It's comforting, but it's superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be known and loved with all of our flaws and our warts, weaknesses, this is, well, it's a little bit like being loved by God, and it's what we all want most. Abona, I see you. I know you. All my attention is with you. I see you, and I allow myself to discover your needs, to see your fears, to identify your mistakes, and accept them. I accept you for what you are, and you are part of me. I had this thought over the last couple of weeks. Why is it that almost everyone seemed to love to be with Jesus, but people are terrified to be themselves and vulnerable at church? Sort on that for a minute. Now maybe you say, hey, I'm not afraid. I mean, I feel comfortable here, and that's cool. I hope you feel like you can be authentic and vulnerable here. But just think about that in general. Why is it that people of all sorts and who had done all kinds of crazy things loved being around Jesus, but very frequently we're terrified at church for someone to know who we really are? Part of it is that we can't see each other as we really are. We value each other for what we do. We value each other for what we have. We value each other for how much we conform to what we think is the right picture of who you should be. So the first step I think that we should think about in terms of trying to know ourselves is thinking about how we know each other. How can you help someone else fully know who they are? To see you. What if we could ask different kinds of questions? What are you passionate about? What makes your heart sing? Why? So he said, who's John Roberts? That guy loves to be up in the woods with his tent trailer. What does that have to do with anything? No, it's what he loves to do. It's like there's this passion to get out and just see things. And what is it what are you passionate about? What makes your heart sing and why? That's a better question than what do you do? What's the best thing happening in your life right now? Maybe what's the hardest thing happening in your life right now? Right? We learn a lot from each other when we ask these kinds of questions. If you could have a meal with anyone in history, who would you choose and why? That would be fascinating. How much do you think you could learn about a person if the first thing you said to them after you met them was, hey, I'm just curious, if you could have a meal with anyone in history, who would you choose and why? First of all, they probably would, be caught off guard by the question. But how much would you learn about a person if they actually answered it? Because it would tell you something about what they value. It would tell you something about what they'd like to be like. If you could solve any problem, which one would you choose and why? This is a question that goes to what you care about in the world and what you think is broken in the world and how you could be a part of fixing it, right? What if we could ask each other these kinds of questions? What brings you joy? What's on your mind lately? One of the questions that Dallas Willard liked to ask people when he was doing direction with them is, what's bothering you lately? Like, what's on your mind lately? Because that says something about us. And so you should ask those questions of yourself. What does make my heart sing? What am I passionate about? If I could have a meal with anybody in history, who would it be? And why would I want to be with them? And some other questions to just ask as we're going through, as we're trying to understand ourselves. So as you go into your life groups this week, what's going on around you to which you need to pay attention? What's making you angry? What's making you sad? What's making you anxious? What's making you glad right now? And get a pulse for your own feelings. What battle are you facing right now that needs to be fought? Is there something you're going through that needs to be addressed? And then, I'll leave the rest up there, but this one. Describe a time that you saw God move in your life when you can say it was unmistakably Him. Notice this is what David returns to when Saul says, you can't do this. You're not outfitted right. and you're just a kid. David says, I know that. That's what you think. But let me remind you of this. I've seen God use me to deliver my lambs from lions and bears. And you probably didn't think I could do that either, but God is able. And so being emotionally healthy and growing up into maturity means knowing yourself and knowing God. And when we know and trust ourselves, we know and trust God, we can live above the fray. And we can be victorious in the life that he's given us. You get to live your life. Don't try to live someone else's. And let God shine through that.